I am coming to you from Dallas Road, which is the traditional territories of the Wasanich, Songhees, and Esquimalt nations. And I grew up in Quebec in a pretty landlocked area. And when I moved to Victoria, for the first few years, I actually lived pretty inland as well, and I basically didn't encounter the ocean at all for a few years, and I didn't really know what I was missing. But then we moved down to Dallas Road. My partner and I found this apartment, a very tiny, not fancy at all apartment on Dallas Road. I encountered this huge, beautiful presence of the Pacific Ocean and this beautiful park all along Dallas Road. And it was a huge revelation for me, and I decided to spend every day a little bit of time down here and every day to write something. So the poems I'm going to read are all really deeply tied to this particular stretch of Dallas Road. And this poem is called Barn Swallow, and it's a bit of a bittersweet poem for me. And it kind of ends on a cliffhanger because last year in the fall, when the migration of the songbirds happened down to South America, there was a huge die-off of migratory birds. An unprecedented number of birds just died while they were trying to migrate. And they're still kind of trying to figure out why. But these swallows that had become kind of, close friends of ours, we felt, are among the types of birds that were dying as they migrated down. So they should be coming back to Vancouver Island in the next week or two. And we don't know if the ones that we knew will make it back or not. So we're waiting with bated breath. And I think that that's one of the important things about getting out into your local environment and getting to know the animals and the birds that live here, because then the stakes for you when something threatens them are so much higher, and you really feel what it means for something like that to happen. Okay, so this is called Barn Swallow. 1. Swallows begin all beak, inscrutable sitters in judgment over the parking enclosure, lemon yellow mouths turned down at the edges, condemning my transportation choices. Open into wide daffodil throats that eclipse the nest when parents come to feed. As weeks pass, they overflow, untidy bird bouquet. Adolescent bodies impossibly inhabit as little space as an egg. One day the nest is empty, hollow cup of mud. But that night they return, crowd back in, not quite ready. 2. Me. Who do you dance for? Swallows. Moths. Me. Where are you going? Swallows. Here, again and again, here, and here, and here. Hovering pinpoints of life, spread in a constellation above the bluff. Connect the dots, dinner dance, every moment, here, and here, and here. Every wing beat, angled exact, going nowhere but here, and here, and here. 3. Swallows are fractals of form and function. Curvy wings and tail map flight paths full of swoop along the beach. Migration arc symmetrical as a pair of wings down the continent and back. This fall, I noticed their absence from my evening walks. Imagine them arriving in South America, equatorial air spiced with flying ants. I don't picture them dropping from the sky into New Mexico swimming pools, Wisconsin highways. Young birds just learn the knack of slipping past gravity, forget in a haze of smoke. Fat reserves and muscle mass melt away, just feather and bone. Should be lighter than air, but they're not. Feathered rain pelts carports and flower beds. Hundreds of thousands, uncountable, unaccountable. Scientists collect bushels of hollow-boned corpses, each load impossibly light, impossibly heavy. Our guilt, impossibly light, decades of decisions lie light as feathers on us. My grief, impossibly heavy, for these friends who grew from peevishness to grace at my doorstep. Waiting. A hulking shrug of sea cans squats in the shadow of rain cast by the Olympic Mountains. The Hanjin Vienna, stranded while bankruptcy proceedings move through court on the other side of the Pacific. 22 crewmen spend Halloween, Christmas, and New Year's Day staring at Vancouver Island, while I sit staring back at them. Finally, in March, they are gone, and the horizon feels lighter, as though a long burden has lifted. I imagine the crew grinding back to life, shaking off the rust of a long West Coast winter, sailing to China, where the ship will be sold for scrap iron, and they will become people again, instead of moving parts in a contested financial asset. We never met, but we shared this winter, 6 slow months, sitting still, me and the crew of that ship, looking across the water, waiting for something to change. This poem is called Nudibranch, and if you're not familiar, a nudibranch is a mollusk, a shellless mollusk, basically a sea slug, and they live, I've actually encountered them in these tidal pools down here, and they're just the most fabulous, bizarre-looking, alien-like creatures that come in all kinds of shapes and sizes with complicated little ruffles of flesh, and they're really beautiful. I recommend Google nudibranch and look at the pictures that come up. Or just come hang out down here. So this poem is called Nudibranch. Well, that's one way to deal with fear. Instead of getting harder, cast off the shell, become all soft underbelly, expose every bit of glowing skin, and dare the world to take a bite. What is armor but participation with the predator? Uncaged by calcium, flesh leaps like flame. Canary, tangerine, violet, luminous cyan. Extravagant ruffles of serrata, so translucent, bits of digestive tract are visible inside. The nudibranch takes a hydroid into its mouth, gently, accepts the polyp's poison, saves explosive defense cells full of venom for later. O noble sea lemon, cryptic nudibranch, dubious dorid, shag rug, moss landing aeolid, O Spanish dancer, called inkspot, glaucus, clown, fuzzy oncodorus, teach me to be soft and inexorable. All right, this poem is called Swimming Up the Dark, and this is one of the most bizarre things that I've witnessed down here, and I highly recommend come down here at low tide and watch the seagulls, and you will see them doing this, feeding on these wriggly little fish down here, and I've seen this exact thing happen, and it's one of the most bizarre things you'll ever see, and I wrote this poem about it. Swimming up the dark. Seagulls troll the shallows, plunge heads below water, surface with wriggling fish, and swallow them whole. At first, it seems the meal is finished. One gulp. But the fish fights its way back, up the gull's throat, swimming up the dark feathered stream, until narrow head protrudes from beak, writhing. A word not yet to be said. The hand of a swimmer going under. The gull chokes it back down, heaving with all the muscles in its throat, every feather on its neck, a sleek hook hauling downward. And the fish sinks for a second time. This is another mollusk poem. It's called Portents. Portents. I shouldn't read too much into the shattered snail on the sidewalk, the golden ratio of its shell, broken beyond repair, boneless flesh spilling out. But this is exactly what I'm afraid of. How fragile symmetry is, how easily rain-drunk hope can be crushed.